apoyarnos con el libro y saber qué actividades hacer con Máximo de acuerdo a su edad, cómo estimularlo, cómo cuidarlo de los peligros de la casa, como cosas que uno como papá nuevo
Desconoce.
no conoce, claro.
Pues a mí me gustaría que lo siguiéramos visitando aquí en la biblioteca de Covelo. Está tranquilo y muy bonito aquí.
Cuando no nos podemos reunir, nos comunicamos por Zoom o una llamada telefónica o por texto.
Donde nos visite, porque ha sido nuestra casa. A veces nosotros vamos a Willits y puede ser en el parque. Gaby llega, hacemos un resumen de cómo ha ido nuestra semana o qué hemos hecho de nuevo, cómo va el trabajo. Luego hacemos las actividades del libro. Vemos si podemos hacer un juguetito nuevo para Máximo. A veces ella lo evalúa, cómo está su sentido motriz, qué ha aprendido de nuevo, nuevas palabras, y jugamos un ratito y conversamos.
A mí personalmente también me ayudó mucho a obtener mi licencia a conducir, que era un objetivo que teníamos en cuanto a la familia,
sí,
para poder estar tranquilos, así que encuentro que ha sido fundamental el apoyo.
El objetivo del programa es que las familias estén bien, y que las familias estén bien significa niños felices, niños sanos, y eso en un futuro es adultos sanos y un mundo mejor. Entonces está bueno.
She has made me feel like I'm important and I can go at my own pace, and that's all you need sometimes when you're feeling like you got nobody.
It was helpful to have somebody there kind of holding my hand and guiding me and letting me know this is kind of the normal. It felt like I was becoming a new mom, so it was very interesting and helpful, very, very helpful.
You know, there was that self-conscious part of me, like, will I be accepted even though I'm not perfect?
What I like the most is that she really listens.
The support that she gives me is special because she does it with love, and it's just natural, you know. That's all I could say. It just feels like somebody that I've known since I was little.
You know, I said to Jeanette, Jeanette, you're supposed to be with me for 5 years. Jeanette said, yeah, I know, I'm going to be with you guys for 5 years. That's when I said, well, I guess I can trust her. She's going to be with us for 5 years.
Yo creo que quizás pasó como a la segunda visita o algo así, como que ya nos presentamos formalmente. Y luego ya creo que en la segunda visita estaba como todo más tranquilo, como muy... como que el ambiente era muy familiar. Entonces... yo me sentí muy cómoda.
I felt like she cared for Sparrow too, and Sparrow really enjoyed it. Yeah, she knew when Gabby came we were going to be making something or learning something, and she'd instantly start digging through Gabby's bags to find out what activity we were going to do.
Not only did we get the assistance with this program, but we also made a really good friend. I'm happy to call Gabby our friend.
I think the relationship that we've built has been she's a part of the family.
September 29th, 2023, and welcome to the General Government Committee meeting. So let's have a roll call.
Chair Hashek.
Here.
Member Mulhern.
Here.
Right, and I'd like Corinne Powell to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so just like to start off the meeting today that I visited the new office of the Cannabis Department over in the Planning and Building. And it was very uplifting. They were excited. I think it was on September 15th I visited, and they had already gotten to issuing 24 permits for the month at that point. And the goal was 50, so they were right on track. And it was really great to see those things moving along as they should be. So congratulations to the staff, and thank you very much for your work on that. I've got some issues I'd like to bring up today, but I'd like to turn to see if Supervisor Mulhern has anything.
Nope, not yet.
Okay. All right, so looking at some of the communications we've received and looking at the agenda, well, is there anything from the staff you'd like to bring up about your report at this point?
Yes, good morning, supervisors. Sarah McBurney, Senior Program Manager with the Mendocino Cannabis Department. Very quickly, just wanted to touch on a couple of high-level pieces of our August monthly report. So for the month of August, we had 20 issuance of licenses, so wanted to call that number out. Additionally, would like to address our department log jams that we're facing. So we currently have a preliminary review and deficiency notice that are submitted to the applicants of 119. So that means we currently have 119 applications that we cannot move forward on because we're missing some piece of information from our applicants. Out of those, we only have 7 that are non-responsive. So we've tried a couple different ways to get a hold of them, but right now it's only 7, which is uplifting, hoping we can get the rest of those moving forward. We also have CDFW responses received to date. We have 27. Out of those, 16 were not less than significant. We have a range of response time from CDFW ranging from 28 to 112 days. Our average response time is 47 days from CDFW. From CDFW referrals, no response received is 69, which with those, there are 34 past the 45-day deadline. And the range from days goes over to 1 day to 60 over the 45-day deadline. As you noted, John, we did move to Ukiah. We started operations in Ukiah as
Sarah,
of
can
September
I
1st.
stop you on that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because the CDFW referrals is on my list, and looking at this information here, that, you know, the ordinance says 30 days that we have the right to move it on, right? And if we don't hear back from CDFW. But then I guess with the negotiations with CDFW, we decided that it would be 45 days was more realistic, and they were into that and understood that after 45 days we can move that on. So these ones that are over 45 days, how are they being dealt with, and do we have all the tools that we need to move those forward?
Yes, so the department has been receiving comment on this, including from MCA, and as a result, we are working on a policy with County Council that would allow us to move past the CDFW response time if they're moving slow because the EIR that is underway.
So we're working on a policy, and County Council's in agreement with that? Is that what we need to make this happen?
Yeah, the Deputy County Counsel Jared Schwass. Yes, we are currently working on a policy to move applications forwards and without further delay from the CDFW.
Okay, so I'm in total support of this policy of, making sure that we can move things along if it's unresponsive and we don't think that there's an egregious environmental damage being done. Let's just move it along, not let the bureaucracy just hold things up, because we have to keep things moving, right?
Understood.
Okay, very good. All right?
Thank you, Supervisor Hashak. So MCD on track. Currently, with the Gantt chart that was published, our projection show will be completed by the end of September 2024. And as noted, our goal is 50 per month. The department believes that we are on track for that. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on, or there's a couple more, the training materials. So MCD is currently revamping our website. We try to touch it as often as possible. We've included new training materials available on there, new forms for the public, in addition to several new training videos and also live streaming of our ordinance updates, et cetera. So we're excited about that. And again, those updates are being made weekly, if nothing less. So always updating that and making sure it's current. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is the department staffing levels. So we're currently evaluating staffing levels as needed. We did do interviews for our planning tech position that we have currently open as a recruitment, and we're excited to receive a great response to that applicant pool, and got several great interviews out of it.
Oh, very good. Okay, so you feel like the staffing's appropriate for what we're trying to do and to keep on with the Gantt chart, keep our timelines in track.
That is correct.
On track. Okay.
That was the end of the high-level overview I had. Supervisor Hashka, if there was anything else that you wanted to comment on?
Well, there was a couple things in the communications about prioritization of phase 1 and phase 2. How are we dealing with that in light of, this impending deadline and everything? And we've got a lot of things going on, the EIR and all this. So I'm just wondering how the department is prioritizing.
Yes, so phase 1 and phase 2 applications can mainly be under review through our 4-leaf contract planners. And so all of those are currently getting worked through. We have, again, it's important to note that as we're working through those, we have several that are held up in these log jams that we're speaking of. So our 4-leaf planners are working through as many as they can as possible until they hit a log jam. They're on pause, and then they move to the next. I do want to note that the 7 non-responsive applicants are big in this. If there's any creative ideas that may help us establish contact, we're open to hearing those. Perhaps even including their names in the next report of the applicants that are not responding to our inquiries. So phase 1 and phase 2 are pretty much being handled by our 4-leaf contract planners. Phase 3, renewals, and anything else that can be handled by MCD staff is being handled by our staff.
Okay, so with the log jams that are happening for some of them and the 7 that are non-responsive, but there's 119 or 112 or whatever it is that are in this log jam, what do you mean by a log jam, and what is causing that?
So with the log jams that the department is currently facing, there's several different log jams that are preventing us. One is applicants that we're waiting on some type of response from. So that was the 119 number. So whether their application is incomplete, whether we need a document from them, something like that, it requires us to stop our process. It's a log jam in our process, and we have to stop what we are doing and wait for that response time for the applicants. Additionally, with CDFW, it's another type of log jam, right? So we've reached out, we have to wait for that commentary. So it stops our process from moving forward. When we talk about our department time studies and how much time it takes to do an application, you can't sit down with an application 25 hours later, it's done. There's several steps in the application that stops you in the process cold, and you have to either move on to a next one or wait. And so there is a flow that is interrupted there as well.
Okay, so even with those log jams, we're able to process those permits because we're on track, that we can keep moving forward with some, but others are being held up, and it's to their detriment if the log jam, if they're not responding to the log jam in a timely way.
That's correct. I think from the applicant's onus, really the 7 applicants that we had talked about that we're not receiving responses from, absolutely, that would be on them if, you know, there's any type of issues with those. Everyone else out of that 119 is working with us. We're receiving comment. And then even CDFW, there's not much that can be done on the applicant's side while we wait through those response times.
Well, having been on the ad hoc committee for several years and then standing committee and all this, and to see that it's just 7 that are non-responsive at this point is really an incredibly good number. You know, it's unfortunate there's 7, but at the same time, it's a lot lower than what we've seen in the past. And so it just shows that people are engaged in trying to move their permits forward.
And then John Burks has commentary, if I may pass it to him through the chair.
Good morning, Supervisor Hashek, Supervisor Mulhern. This is John Burks on special assignment from the Executive Office, and I did want to make a comment in terms of applicant communications. The planning staff under Sarah had reached out to code enforcement to learn how we utilize all the tools at our disposal to communicate with applicants. And so I've been spending time over there, and code enforcement with our combined, you know, like resource sharing efforts have been assisting in, you know, working on educating, you know, planners who may not have the experience that we have getting a hold of people in Mendocino County. It's not always as easy as sending a letter or, you know, getting updated email addresses. So we're helping hopefully to break down some of those, you know, potential log jams using our collective experience. And it seems to be working really well, and we're trying to formulate some procedures around that.
Okay, very good. I had a question about the Planet Labs contract for satellite imagery, and it's on the board's agenda for tomorrow, and it's an increase of another $1 million or so. And so I was just wondering how that's going with Planet Labs, what the idea is, and I was wondering if someone could talk about the pilot program we're trying to do with inspections.
Yes, the department is really excited about our Planet Labs and GIS capabilities that we have within the department. So in September, stay tuned. This is a sneak peek at our September report, but we have started a beta program to look at aerial inspections. So our first one took place on September 12th. And basically with that, we are doing a simple random sample of both renewals and initial application issuance. And we are doing a comparative analysis for on the ground versus aerial imagery. What can be seen, what can't, what's the cost savings, what's the mile savings, really just what the data shows, and really trying to have unbiased results for what aerial imagery could bring to us. And so that Planet Labs is funded with the LJAGP funds, and it's a contract extension for another year with them.
All right. So we'll know more soon about what the results are compared to on-the-ground inspections, right? And if we're getting accuracy and reliability.
Yeah, that is correct. I think that the beta program runs through September, and you know, ultimately the satellite imagery is costly, so I think that's important to note, and that will be taken into consideration with our comparative analysis as well. But yeah, September is data collecting month, and then we will work to get those results compared.
And that goes into one of the questions from MCA about the time study, and you know, 15 hours for the review, and so does that include the inspection or not? And then, you know, if F-Planet lab, that satellite imagery works out and it's more cost effective and quicker, then that could cut down that 15 hours possibly too. Is that the idea?
Absolutely. So yes, the 15-hour renewal time study does include the site inspection time. And yes, so if planet imagery, satellite imagery helped with those remote inspections, that would mean less of a review time.
Okay, very good. Any questions? Okay. Well, anything else from staff?
Deputy Council, County Council Jared Schwass, I know there's questions about the EIR, address those right now. The DCC they ended their public comment on the scoping for the EIR at the end of August, and we have an upcoming meeting with them on the 27th. We're hoping to get an idea, more of an update then. There were also questions about funding and what the funding was going to be used for. That funding is and how that's going to relate to specific applicants and license holders. The funding is going to include phase 1 provisional license holders site-specific review. We don't have any clear indication of whether or not that's going to include the cost for any additional studies needed at each site. That is clarification we'll request from DCC. And then at our meeting on the 27th. And then also, what we've received from the DCC is regarding the use of Appendix G materials that have already been created. All we've received from the DCC is an intention to use those for the site-specific reviews. How that specifically works out, we haven't received specifics from the DCC. I believe they may, I don't want to speak for them, but there's a potential that those specifics won't fully come out until further down the EIR process. But again, this is a topic we'll address on the 27th when we have our meeting with them.
Okay, so really the ball's in the DCC's court as far as how they want to deal with the Appendix G and the EIR and how those are going to mesh, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
And then that is my update for the EIR. We'll have more. Hopefully, we'll have more information on the 27th when we have the meeting. We'll be able to bring these topics up and get an update from them, especially given the end of public comment was on the end of August, and we haven't had a meeting with them since then. So it would be nice to get an update.
Okay, and then as far as the ordinance, second round of ordinance changes.
Yes.
That you've had 2 meetings so far.
Yeah, we've had two public meetings. We have really good comments from the public, and the plan is, the next plan is the next GGC meeting is to present either a list of potential changes and present them to you two, or have a draft amended ordinance presented to you for comment, direction. And then the hope after that is to move forward to the board, so then we don't have to come back here multiple times again, so we can keep moving forward and then the hope is to have the approved ordinance amendments, I believe, by the end of the year, if I understand the timeline correct.
Yeah, Steve.
County Council.
Oh, Christian Curtis, County Council. You're muted. Oh. You're muted still. Okay. We can't hear you.
Give us one moment. We're working on fixing that technical issue.
So I guess and I'll just speak while we're trying to figure that out, that what's happening is that the idea is that the draft changes will be brought back directly to the GGC, and that we will look at them at that point. There'll be public comment. There'll be, we'll have, like before we had a separate meeting, but now we're thinking about having it just within the GGC context and having it in that forum.
Yeah, and I don't believe that would also preclude us from having an additional meeting with the public as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, So I guess we should probably talk and figure out if we want to have a meeting. It certainly helps to have that kind of public comment and everything, and just focus on the one issue before the GGC, and then, but, so I'm looking for, I guess we'll have that conversation at some point. Okay, yeah. County Council?
Are you able to hear me now, Mr. Chair?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Just a couple of things I wanted to add to what Mr. Swa said before, which is with respect to the Appendix Gs, I just want to alert the committee there is a possibility that we may not have one blanket answer from DCC. Given the fact that this is a site-specific review, I actually see a real possibility that the way that the Appendix G gets used might be different for different sites. That it may depend upon what are the needs for the environmental document in a particular site, and then how Appendix G gets used, or what's the most efficient way to proceed may differ from case to case. So I want the community to be aware there may not be one clean blanket answer that comes back. With respect to the the special meeting option, I think really it's the pleasure of the committee as to what you'd like to do. I would note, as chair of the committee, you don't have to hold a meeting to be able to schedule a special meeting. You can sort of schedule that at any time. One thing that we could do is that as we come up on the date of the regular meeting, you could look at the calendar and see what's on for the committee. How busy a day you think that will be, and if you think if it warrants a special meeting, you can choose to set one at that time. And the Brown Act does allow you to coordinate with Supervisor Mulhern for the purposes of setting a date for that meeting.
Okay, so just looking at the timeline, if the goal is to get these in place by the end of the year, and does that mean the ordinance operational, or so if we're looking at that, then we need board approval by November, right? So we need it to be approved by the GGC in the next October meeting. So really, if we're having a special meeting, we'd have to have it sometime in October, right? So.
Yeah, I agree with your timeline.
Okay. All right. So do you want to try to set that date now?
If that works for the committee, I think we can do that.
That would probably be best. Some date in October. Yeah, we have the standing committee on the 30th. You'd probably want some time after the special meeting, before the standing committee meeting, so that any kind of changes could be adopted and ironed out. So we looking at, well, the week of the 16th is pretty busy for both of us. And how about October 11th?
There's a meeting with the DCC and Mendocino. We have a meeting with our DCC colleagues on that day.
Oh, on the 11th?
Yes.
Okay.
The 23rd?
Yeah. Would 1 week allow time for, deal with any changes, or is that enough time before presenting to the GGC?
I believe that would be sufficient.
Mr. Chair, given the publication deadlines, we may not actually have the document ready within that timeline. Mine's just looking at October 20th.
Yeah, that Friday.
Yeah, sometimes just having a weekend to get things done can really help.
October 20th works for me, but we could also do it October 10th.
The 20th works, I think, would be best.
Okay. October 20th. Okay.
Through the chair, if I may, this is Atlas Pearson, Senior Deputy Clerk of the Board. Clerk of the Board is short-staffed on October 20th. So if this is going to be a regular or a special meeting, we would have to figure something out as I'm the only one here that day.
It's just the day before the board meeting is. How about October 10th?
If there's nothing that works in the week of October 16th to the 20th, we could believe we can do October 10th. I just want to give us ample enough time frame to present the proposed changes in that meeting.
You know, the 16th it's the day before the board meeting. I'm sure the clerk of the board would need that time. And then the 19th, we have a Great Redwood Trail meeting.
Understood.
Well, the 13th, yeah, we could do the 13th. I mean, does that work?
Yeah.
13th?
Can we do it early? Can we?
What's early to, this 9 a.m. or 8 a.m.?
How long do we expect it to be? An hour or two, or
I believe how long did the last one?
That one we did lasted all morning.
Yeah, it's gonna, I believe,
afternoon, whatever it was.
I am flexible on the 13th, so.
we can't do the 10th? The 10th would be better for me, but is that too soon, you're
Okay.
thinking?
We can make it work.
Okay.
Okay, so should we say the 10th at 9 o'clock?
Yeah.
Now, the last time we did the special meeting, it was in conference room C. And we don't need the chambers, do we? Or does it work better for clerk of the board and everyone?
Atlas Pearson, Senior Deputy Clerk of the Board. Chambers is a little bit nicer for us. We've got everything set up. But if you wanted us to look into doing conference room C again, I could work with IT to make that happen.
No, if the chambers are available and it's better for you, then it's fine with me.
Yes, they're open on the 10th.
Okay. So are we still checking? It's good? All right, so we'll have the special meeting of the General Government Committee on the October 10th at 9 o'clock in the chambers here to deal with round 2 of the ordinance changes. Okay, very good. What else are we talking about?
Those are the updates I have for the committee.
Okay, you know, I know that MCA wrote a memo about some of their concerns. So let's see. Do we want to go through this quickly? We've addressed quite a few of the issues already about the CDFW, MCD on track, environmental review. I think there's some clarifying questions. Will the allocated $5 million in LJAGP funds for Ascent cover additional site-specific studies that may be needed for applicants? I think that was part of the direct, isn't that part of the direct grants?
Yeah, Deputy Accounting Counsel Jared Schwass. I believe I did touch on this, the funds used for the EIR will cover phase 1 provisional license holders. It will cover their site-specific review. What is unclear is whether or not that the funds will cover additional studies that are needed for that for that review.
So that might be part of the direct grants then. Is that, am I clear on that, or we don't know?
That we don't have a solid answer for that. We can.
Okay. Okay. And okay, and the training materials, and thank you. It seems like there's a lot more information going out, and I think we're working with LACO for training materials for the public, and so any update on anything with training materials?
Sarah McBurney, Senior Program Manager. Yes, that is correct. We are currently working with LACO. LACO is establishing direct how-to user guides for Excella platform as their main focus for the public. So it'll help them have the public-facing side of the training materials to see and know exactly how to navigate through the software. Additionally, what our public will see on the website is our internal training that has been requested for many months, as well as checklists that the team is working through, such as our site inspection checklist is now published up to date on the website, and a lot of really different great tools for the public if they're looking for it.
Okay. Very good. So let's turn to public comment. And Michael, I hope that we got a lot of your questions addressed, but go ahead, and if there's any that aren't addressed, please bring them forward.
Great, thanks. Michael Katz, Executive Director of the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. Good morning, county staff, supervisors. So this might go a little bit longer than usual. A couple of things. So related to the CDFW item, glad that there's a policy being worked on, but also concerned about the length that it will take to develop a policy. I mean, understanding that we have the 30 days in the ordinance, and that we've discussed the 45-day extension, you know, day 46, I think, should be, all right, well, it's as if they came back and said there's no issue, just whatever that, and inform the licensee that they are, you know, that 45-day period is passed and they are now moving forward. So whatever that very next step is.
So if I could interrupt. So turning to county council, is with this policy, how long will that take to develop? I think that's the question is, you know, why aren't we implementing it right away? And so with this policy, how quickly can we see it implemented?
Deputy County Counsel Jared Schwass, I believe once it's finalized and fully approved by all the necessary parties, I believe it can be implemented rather quickly, within days, since it is a policy decision by the MCD, so it can be implemented very quickly.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may just add a little bit, it's not quite as simple as saying that once we haven't received a response from CDFW, that's the equivalent of finding no significant impacts. The language of the ordinance and the nature of the environmental review would still require the county to proceed with what it has. It just would have to make an evaluation based on the information that's available.
Okay.
Okay, great. And so, yeah, I mean, just hearing that there are some, like the average is 46 days, that means that more than half are over 45 days. And so sounds like a lot of those should already be moving forward. So logjam, word of the day. But that seems like a way to expedite those at least. Related to the prioritization phase 1 and phase 2, we understand that staff are being tasked with phase 3 and renewals. But renewals aren't happening, which is totally okay as long as local authorization is still provided to the state. But phase 3, maybe there's 20 applications. So neither the phase 3 operators nor the people who have local permits but not state provisionals, because they won't be able to get provisionals, that doesn't exist anymore, so they have to wait till their annuals. There's no annuals being distributed until after the EIR. It seems that just technically the people who do not have provisionals right now won't be able to even start considering what that looks like until the EIR is done. So perhaps it would make more sense to focus more internal staff time also on processing phase 1 and phase 2 and doing other things related to the phase 1 and phase 2 cohort, maybe related to equity, maybe related to different things that need to happen, just because of the practical timelines of actually anybody in phase 3 or without a provisional starting to cultivate. That make sense?
Yeah, I turn to staff for comment.
Sarah McBurney, Senior Program Manager. In regards to prioritization, I do want to reiterate the Gantt chart. So with current department priorities, we are on track, and the department feels confident in that. Additionally, the department definitely appreciates operational latitude to process as we see fit. We currently are processing renewals in addition to our phase 1 and phase 2 applications as well, and are on track for our deadline.
Okay. Mr. Dunnicliff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve Dunnicliff. And so I think that one other item here is our first draft of the Gantt chart may make this appear as more of a black and white issue than it is. And we'll continue refining the Gantt chart. But as I read the Gantt chart, it reflects that phase 1 and 2 materials aren't going to begin with MCD staff until January. I don't think that that's entirely accurate. And so we'll continue refining the Gantt chart. You know, really, this first draft was intended to show we're on track. We believe that we're going to be able to get everything done prior to the deadline. But we'll try to continue polishing this to better reflect actual operations.
Okay. Cool. Okay, let me just look through here real quick. EIR information, thank you for checking into that. Certainly, we would hope that the funding that's set aside would cover additional studies. You know, this is grant money that is dedicated, that then didn't wind up as direct grant funding, and people are still probably going to have a lot of challenges funding some of those things. They can get expensive. Also, you know, in terms of how the LJAGP program rolls out, if it winds up being something that's more reimbursement based, then it would not be funding, say, future work. So it would have to be something that already happened. I also want to talk to the ordinance streamlining component, which is that in the meetings it was discussed that the council, GGC, the committee, would provide direction to staff as to what the language should look like coming back. And so we just want to make sure, and as we provided to you all the recommendations that we made, there's some that are specifically related to streamlining applications, streamlining processes, but there are some that are just kind of like more big picture benefits that would benefit a large number of people, the county in general. And so those were kind of the two categories we looked at, but it sounds like the staff would need clear direction from the committee to include items that are not exclusively for streamlining in this round of changes. So that full list, we believe it is a prioritization list. It's not everything that we would like to see changed. And hopefully with the time and resources available, all of those items can be included, but staff sounds like they will need clear direction from you to incorporate those. So just the request is to make that direction.
Right, and so if I'm understanding correctly, that there's this request for items, you know, in different buckets of benefit, and that the GGC is going to have to give staff some guidance, understanding that, you know, there's probably a lot of things that we could be doing with the ordinance, but that, you know, we have limited time, we have limited staffing, and so we're going to have to take all of that into consideration. And so I think that will come up in the special meeting on October 10th, and we'll try to give some clear guidance at that point.
Sure, I guess just the one item for consideration is that since language will be coming, draft language will be coming at that point, to make sure that those items are included at least for consideration, even if, say, we identify that there isn't enough time or resources or whatever, just making sure that they're not left out of that round of consideration so that we can look at all the things together and say, you know, can we do this? Is there something we can't do? Because like a significant percentage of that list are items, say, that are just quick fixes, that are language fixes that align with state language. And so like there's no impact to anything beyond just like a couple of words changed here or there. And if we had done a true priority list, like maybe we wouldn't have included those, but since they seem like relatively simple changes, we wanted to get them into this round as well. But the bigger picture items, I think that's where the question comes in. So just wanting to make sure that that consideration is included for the meeting on the 10th.
Okay. And I guess that, you know, with the couple of meetings that have happened so far, I guess staff understands exactly what you're talking about. And so we'll, you know, I'll talk with staff in the meantime, and we'll come back on the 10th.
Okay, great. And yeah, that's what I have at the moment. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Good morning, Corinne Powell.
Good morning.
There were a lot of things to review for this meeting. And some of them we have discussed and some of them we haven't. And I'm not quite sure how items were chosen by staff to discuss. But the first thing I'd like to do is draw attention to staff memo with today's date, separate from the monthly report. And on page 2, under general updates, the first item indicates that due to an inaccurate bit of information, that some applicants did not go through the original equity process.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the LEEP program right now.
The LEEP program.
Yeah, and that's the next item. We're not dealing with LEEP right now.
Okay.
We will come back, we'll come to it in 2B.
Okay, I can wait till then and
Yeah.
raise some other questions.
Yeah.
In the letters that were supplied back and forth with GoBiz folks, they were very helpful, and I appreciate that some of that information was included. In the future, it will also be very helpful if we have access as the public to reports that have been submitted, because we're seeing sort of a conversation about data, but we don't know really what data was submitted to the state. And in the past, we had asked for access to information regarding summaries or amendment changes and things like that that we didn't have access to. So moving forward, hopefully we can have more of the submitted data for which we're getting into conversation about what to do next. And that raises the point of a significant amount of money that's expected to go back to the state at the end of October, if
Corinne,
not.
I think you're talking about LEAP still.
Okay.
And all those things, and so let's just deal with the report at this point.
So you want comments only on the monthly report?
Yeah.
I don't think I can go into just those individual issues, but I'll be back.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on item 2A?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm learning to wear glasses, so I'm not sure when to put them on. Chantal Simon Pietri with Mainspring Consulting. Hi, everybody. I have comments related specifically to the SSHR referral process and with CDFW. First, we've talked over the last couple of years about a streamlining of the county's referral process and a refinement of the Exhibit A document that the county uses internally that determines who does get referred to DFW.
The screening tool?
Yeah, and I haven't heard an update on that, whether or not that screening tool has been updated, and if so, if an updated version has been provided out to the public. I'm wondering in CDFW, this is a question, can I just keep going with the rest of my comment, or should we wait?
Should we just get an answer
Sure.
to that? Yeah.
Deputy County Counsel Jared Schwass. Yeah, we've been working with CDFW and revising that streamlining tool. We have sent them a proposed revised red line of that tool, and we're waiting for their response.
Can you give some timeline? Like when was it sent, and when are you expecting a response?
It was sent a week or two ago.
Okay.
And I do not have a date for an expected response. We'll continue to follow up.
Okay.
What's that?
A request, well, my comments come in, and I heard what County Councilor Curtis shared about when there's not a regulatory requirement that upon referral, if there's no response, that it automatically allows for approval, like what there is with the operation of law agreements that CDFW has. And so the way Michael phrased it made a really good point. If the average processing time is taking longer than 45 days, then there are many people in that pool that have been referred that are not being processed, that are just sitting stagnant. And I'm wondering still, without the streamlining tool have been put into place yet, are there other ways that that tool can still be modified to include a prioritization of review? What DFW does with 1600s when they received like thousands at a time in 2017 and 2018, they prioritized ones that they knew they wanted to spend more time on, and they let many of them just go to OPLAWs. Like ones that just had a groundwater well, they provided a well completion report, they had one small stream crossing, very simple site in DFW opinion. And so I'm wondering if some sort of parallel program can be worked through with the SSHR process that DFW would be willing to work with in order to allow, one, less people to be referred through a refinement of the streamlining, and two, a prioritization of those based upon an agreed upon prioritization between the department and both departments, MCD and CDFW, so that when they're received by DFW, there is a, hey, we can see that XYZ things happened on this property. This one really needs your input. Or, hey, on this one, we checked one box as no on the referral tool, which is an automatic referral, and it might be requiring less of a review, so then DFW can internally prioritize. In my communication back and forth with the person who's receiving SSHRs referred to her, and the spreadsheet that she's developing, sometimes the agent is getting notice that there's been a referral, so I would also ask that in every single time there's a referral, I think I've made this request before, and I think it is for the most part happening, is that when there's a referral that the agent also be contacted, because there are additional documents that the agent may be holding or other site-specific environmental consultants may be holding that could inform the SSHR review, which haven't yet been needed to be provided to the county, so the county doesn't have them. I'm holding all of my biological reports, for example, and not providing those yet to the county because there's no need to. The county doesn't have, it's not a required document. They would have been submitted with the Appendix G site-specific supporting materials, but since we're aborting that process, those documents are there. They have a lot of information that answers the SSHR raised concerns, and they've already been paid for too, so it'd be another way to use a document that's been paid for and is professionally prepared technical document.
Okay.
That's all.
All right. I think that those comments were noted. Okay. Any other public comment? Any online?
Yeah, first up we have Hannah Nelson.
Okay. Ms. Nelson, good morning.
Good morning. First off, I really appreciate the detail that everybody is going into, and it's really important to nail down these details. With respect to Chantal's comments right now about the screening tool, I did send staff a red line version that she and I worked on and asked that they present to CDFW. And so it would be very helpful if we are kept in the loop, since it's in large part our direct expertise that have gone into helping the county negotiate this issue and deal with it. So we would certainly appreciate the direct update since we put in so much of our volunteer efforts. Also, not to beat a dead horse, but I totally appreciate that County Council is working on a policy to implement the moving the application along, but there's still no indication of how long it will take them, meaning County Council and MCD, to refine that. We understand that it will be implemented as soon as it's refined, but some indication of how long it will be before they're able to finalize that would be really, really helpful to know. I'm just going to kind of keep blasting forward, if that's okay. On the October 10th and the issues regarding coming back with the amendments, I think that Michael really put it well in terms of this chicken and egg issue. On the one hand, we really want to put in our best efforts to make that meeting, the special meeting, the most efficient and the most productive as possible. And what has allowed us to work with staff in the past is an interactive process whereby we have some idea of what's coming forward before the 48 hours before. And so I would implore staff to reach out to us and give us an idea of what they're going to be presenting forward so that we know where to direct our efforts during the special meeting when asking the GGC to give direction to staff to flush out certain provisions or move forward with certain provisions versus not. So everything that can be done on that end would be helpful. Every day helps. With respect to the site-specific studies, to kind of hammer home a point that Michael made very well, but I want to kind of really nail down, the LJAGP funding, half of the direct grant funding was taken back and attributed to both the EIR and site-specific review process. Therefore, the pool of funds that will be available for direct grants for applicants to do things like their site-specific reviews, not the reviews, but their studies, is actually going to, first off, it's probably going to be reimbursement, so that's going to be tricky, but also it's going to be half the amount, so that amount has to be spread about a little bit more finely. As a result, everybody who was originally counting on those studies being covered are not going to find themselves in that situation. So nailing down with the state whether or not the contractor who's being paid, not the $1 to $2 million it might take to do the EIR, but an extra $3.5 million to do site-specific should in fact include the site-specific studies that might be needed. That's a really important detail to nail down, as well as the timing. On a few other issues with respect to the having MCD prioritize the phase 1 and phase 2 applications, I think that that makes sense, again, as Michael indicated, that those phase 3 applicants are not able to conduct any cultivation, so there's no way until after the EIR that they can get an annual anyway, and they can't start to cultivate until then. So it really does make sense. It's not a matter of a preference for phase 1 or phase 2. It's really just a matter of the workflow. That is the work that needs to be done at this point that could viably turn into annual licenses. There's a few minor notes operationally. Their training tools of MCD, which are very helpful, and we really appreciate all of the information that's being posted on the website. But they indicate that the 4-leaf contract planner is to issue a 15-day notice, and then if there's no response, another 7-day notice. Unfortunately, what I've been experiencing over the past few weeks is contract planners going straight to 7-day notices, and in many cases, applicants have literally not heard anything since the original portal submission 2 years ago. And therefore, after a couple of years of waiting, after having resubmitted entirely, they're now being asked for 7-day submission. And so, particularly right now, we're at harvest time. I just thought I'd, key open that issue and operationally just have MCD check with the 4-leaf planners to make sure that they are in fact doing the 15-day notice. We all want everything
Yeah, Hannah,
to move
we got
fast,
yeah.
but I think
I think we're in agreement on that.
okay. Yeah, and then another thing is that it would be great to have a little bit more update on the Acela, not just the training tools, but there have been some major glitches, and I know that tech support is limited and the amount of effort it takes to fix certain things takes a lot, but it's like not really a functional system yet. And to require applicants and their agents to use the system when in fact it's not really working, it would be really helpful to understand when those fixes of all the glitches are going to be happening. Finally, another suggestion is to post an inspection list. One of the things that's happened is that there have been some people who have already had inspections, and the inspectors who are calling to schedule inspections didn't necessarily know it. And so it might be helpful if MCD posts a list of the inspections that are going to be happening with the AG numbers. And then if somebody sees, they can check it weekly for what's coming up that week or in the next 2 weeks. And if the person sees their name on the list and they know they've already been inspected, they can then contact the inspector or MCD. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the first question was about the CDFW and if there's any kind of idea about how long this negotiation with them would take for the, the policy development.
Well, and if I may, Steve Dunnicliff, Mr. Chair, I don't see the policy development as a negotiation item between the county and CDFW. I see that as an internal item. Certainly, Deputy County Counsel can correct me if I'm wrong. What we want to do is make sure that we've carefully coordinated through County Counsel's office to ensure that the county is being responsible with the implementation of that policy. So with all that being said, I keep hearing requests for a sense as to how long. I think that we're talking a week or two. We're not talking a month or two, if that helps.
Okay, that's quicker than I thought. Okay, very good. Okay, and then the EIR, SSR, any comment about that?
Deputy County Counsel Jared Schwartz, from what I understand what the inquiry was, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more, was about the continual updates. Is that what you're asking about?
Well, it was like how the grant money for the SSR, and we covered that before, and I think that, I don't know if there's any more to be said about it, but anyway.
Sorry, on that front, like I said, we have the meeting on the 27th.
Yeah.
The DCC will inquire at that point.
Okay, very good. And then finally, Acela, and is there any update or anything staff can tell us about Acela, how that's working?
Yeah, Sarah McBurney, Senior Program Manager. With Acela, I do want to just say it is working. We're issuing permits out of it. We are currently doing a workflow that allows us to do the ultimate goal of permit issuance. So I do want to just kind of change that narrative a little bit with respect to the fact that the feedback we're receiving is definitely important. It's appreciated. Anytime there are tiny bugs that we can fix, our IT department has been a great collaborator in making sure that that is corrected. There are glitches that need to be held for our phase 2 implementation. So mainly the streamline ordinance went live the same day or the next day after our Acela rollout was done. So in terms of the workflow process, it does need to be revamped. We are working towards the phase 2 implementation of that, and are hoping to have that done within the next year or so before it goes live. But I do want to note that, currently with Acela, I think the how-tos that LACO is working on is going to be extremely helpful for the public. Any glitches that are seen or any issues that the public is having, please reach out to us. We're happy to assist. And then additionally, just note that we are aware phase 2 workflow needs to happen and we're working on it.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so are there any other online comments? Okay. All right, back to the board. Any further comments? Okay. So I think we have a plan for the special meeting on October 10th, 9 o'clock, right here in the chambers. And I think there's an understanding for some of the other issues that we just talked about. Okay. Certainly the CDFW policy and all that. Okay, moving on to agenda. Oh, can we keep rolling to 2B? Clerk? Okay. All right, discussion and possible action, including informational update from the Mendocino Cannabis Department for both the local equity cannabis grant and the local jurisdiction assistance grant. Right, so certainly there's some comments and a lot going on between the county and the state with both the LEEP and the LJAGP grants. So looking to staff for any additional comments or?
Yes, Sarah McBurney, Senior Program Manager. So with our grant update memo, it goes into the nitty-gritty, everything that is kind of needed with both programs and where they stand. For general updates, I do want to point out that we are going to reopen a equity eligibility window. This window will specifically be for applicants who qualified for local verification under the criterion of being an individual who has obtained or applied for a cannabis permit in Mendocino County, or who has worked in or currently works in the cannabis industry and was arrested and or convicted of a nonviolent cannabis-related offense. This specific eligibility window is open due to inaccurate information given by the MCD at a public meeting. We are also looking to contract with a qualified cannabis grant program admin. This would be done through an RFP, and so we're looking to get that out to the public here shortly. And that would be for any LEEP round 5 if we were to get that, and then also our LJAG program that is going to be hopefully starting up in January of 2024.
And that's for administration of the grant. Okay.
Yep, that is correct.
And just an idea is I was talking to people from Humboldt County and their economic development team, and I guess they run they administer their LEEP grant internally. So I was wondering if there's been any outreach to them to see if they'd be interested in cooperating or taking on our administration, since they're doing it for Humboldt County.
Yeah, the county is actually looking to collaborate with several different communities and local other jurisdictions that are operating great equity programs. We have reached out, or we're going to be reaching out to several different jurisdictions, and I'll look to see if Humboldt's on the list as well.
Oh, very good, thank you.
So I think with going into the LEEP updates, one of the big questions that is currently around in the community is our GoBiz 5-mile equity criterion. So we did include as attachments both the initial correspondence from GoBiz calling into question that criteria. We also included MCD's response to that memo. And then I think what's important is, from that, the GoBiz is really looking for that quantifiable data that supports that 5-mile criterion to the individual. The criteria deemed by GoBiz is overly inconsistent and inclusive with the California Cannabis Equity Act, and it may have contractual restrictions and limitations placed on how CEG program funding provided by GoBiz may be utilized. So with that, we're still looking to answer GoBiz and provide a map of any known camp raids and dates. So our cartographer will be working on that after prioritization of the residual direct grants funds are implemented. Our deadline for the LEEP round 3 disbursement is October 31st of 2023. So we're coming up on that quick. The department feels good about what we're currently working on to try to get as many direct grants out as possible, not relying on solely the 5-mile radius criterion. The department currently has $910,000 available in direct grant funding. And I do want to note that throughout the calendar year of 22-23, we did give out $659,000 in equity waivers to our applicants as well. As our audit findings came back, we received notice that round 1 and round 2 funding that was not expended by the grant expiration dates will likely need to be returned to the state. We're working with GoBiz on those and trying to figure out how much of the funding we can classify, reclassify for technical assistance. But at this time, staff believes the amount that needs to be returned from round 1 and round 2 is about $400,000. Any remaining funds from round 3 not expended by October 31st will also need to be sent back to the state, and staff is working to minimize that amount of funding as much as possible.
So with the round 1 and 2 and the 400 that we need to return, that we can't disperse any more of that. So we need to give the 400 back to the state.
Yes, the total amount of funding that will need to be returned to the state is going to be contingent upon audit findings. So we're investigating measures right now to minimize the amount of funds from round 2 by classification of our subcontractor expenses. But ultimately, if we do not get the reclassification approved, it will need to be about $400,000.
Okay. And then for round 3, we're looking at 900 that we still need to disperse.
Yes, $910,000 in direct grants. There is technical assistant and administrative funds available for round 3 as well. So the department is working to go through those in addition to the direct grant funding that's still open.
Okay.
And then for LJAG updates, LJAGP, Local Jurisdiction Assistance Grants Program, we're currently working with members of the community to revise our program manual for $4.8 million in direct grant distribution to operators to assist transition from provisional to annual licensure. The program manual currently is modeled around a reimbursement model with an award amount of up to $50,000 per applicant. The department anticipates the expected timeline for the grant, direct grant application submittal will open up in January of 2024. And that will be in support of the deadline given by DCC of December 31st, 2024 as well to get everyone to annual.
So do we have an RFP for administration of that?
That's the one the department is currently working on.
Okay. And will that be the same as for the LEEP, or are they 2 different entities we're looking at, or 2 different jobs?
The current RFP is generalized for grant administration in total. So this could provide services for both the LEEP and LJAG program currently if we were to see round 5, or if the department were to take on any new projects as well. The RFP would allow for a more generalized grant administration.
Okay.
Those are the high level updates. Supervisor Hashak, did you have any further questions on the update?
Well, there's been a lot of communication. I know that the cannabis community has reached out to GoBiz about the extension, seeking an extension. I just want to hear from the department again about what your feeling is about the October 31st deadline.
Yes, at this point, we did initially ask GoBiz for an extension. That extension request was not met or not approved. The department currently feels pretty good about getting the most grant funds out as possible. Currently started to already work with local applicants to get their direct grants processed and into Cobblestone so we can finish the routing process in time. And so the department currently feels comfortable with that deadline.
Okay, so with the deadline, I know that Cobblestone takes a while. does it need to be entered into Cobblestone, or does it need to be spit out of Cobblestone and the check cut or by October 31st?
Both. So it
Oh.
will need to be entered and routed all the way to completion through Cobblestone.
Okay. Okay, so really they need to be entered into Cobblestone in the next few weeks. Is that probably correct?
Yes, so Steve Dunnicliff, Mr. Chair, and the department has begun entering those as of, I believe, Friday. The first contract went into Cobblestone. There's one related item also that I wanted to make the committee aware of, and it's related to Elevate Impact, the contractor that had done LEEP processing for the county. There's Sarah McBurney, our senior program manager, had alluded to the fact that we're trying to potentially reclassify some funds between general admin and technical assistance. We believe that this contractor has provided technical assistance on behalf of county applicants that and has been unable to be paid for that work. We're working to see if we can get approval for those invoices to be reclassified. At which point they would be eligible for payment, but we also believe that a retroactive contract amendment might need to be processed. And so bringing this up for your awareness that without the October 31st deadline, that we would likely be bringing a contract amendment directly to the Board of Supervisors for a retroactive agreement if we're able to pull this together.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Mulhern.
Thank you. I am very appreciative of the optimism of staff and the use of Cobblestone. I mean, obviously, we've had concerning timelines using that program in the past with these grants. So in what ways are we communicating with potential applicants that they need to be prepared also on their end? Obviously, we can do what we can do internally, but I know that there is a process that applicants need to follow, and we have a very short timeline. In what ways are we communicating with them that this is coming?
If I may, through the chair. So currently I am communicating with applicants via phone and email. Thankfully, most of our applicants, all of them, were very excited to receive my calls and have been very supportive in any deadlines that are needed. Quickly checking through my email this morning, I believe I've got most of what is needed back from the applicants. I also would like to point out that we have received previous files that were submitted through the Elevate Impact portal, so we were able to get those files back. And so a lot of our applicants were ready to go already in the files we'd received. There was just a few that had been in the medium of being processed and weren't completed. So I reached out to those applicants to grab their finalized, whether it be budgets or invoices or whatever was needed on their end.
Okay. And with the 5-mile radius issue, and the state has some zip codes, like northern Mendocino County is declared as eligible for equity grants. So how does that mesh with what we're doing with the 5-mile radius? If you're in that, those zip codes or that zone, are those all eligible regardless of the 5-mile issue?
With our current criteria, it is specific to the 5-mile radius. However, in conversations with GOBAs, there is talks of changing the eligibility criteria for future rounds moving forward to align with the DCC criteria, which would include the criterion that you're speaking to.
Yeah, it seems like that would be beneficial to everyone, aligning with what the state's doing or what they've recognized as people impacted. So good. I'm glad that those conversations are happening. Okay. So seeing nothing more from the board, anything else from staff? Okay, we'll go to public comment.
Good morning, supervisors, county staff. Michael Katz, Executive Director for the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. So regarding also the 5-mile radius, though, we know that there are, I don't know how many operators. I would love to know how many people that were on equity designated that now have been told that they're not going to be able to access these direct grant funds because they applied solely under the 5-mile radius, and the continued question that we have had about those people being able to provide affidavits to align with their direct impact, like the direct impact that they had, to bridge the gap between just what a 5-mile radius is and how that impacted people. So my first question is, has that specifically been discussed with GoBiz? Is that something that can happen? And when we're talking about this $910,000 in direct grant funds, is that for people who fit both of those categories and add the additional direct impact, or is that just for people who do not fall solely under the 5-mile radius? That's my first question, if we could address that before I go on.
Well, yeah, how many are affected? Just use that exclusively, the 5-mile radius. Do we have a number on that, or?
We do. Steve Dunnicliff, 131 is our number.
Okay. And then also about the affidavit, are there discussions about the affidavit or some kind of way of bridging that, the personal story to that too broad of what they're considering too broad of a criteria?
The department has not specifically asked GoBiz if a affidavit could be used to bridge the gap that is needed. From our understanding and memos that we've received from GoBiz, they're looking for a more concrete, quantifiable data in terms of how that's impacting our individual community members.
If I may, through the chair, the equity assessment that we did here in Mendocino County identifies the significant amount of paramilitary activity that our community faced, and it accurately identified, even in the letter from the county back to GoBiz about the development of the 5-mile radius. There's not a lot of paperwork from camp. People are not able to get those through public records requests. A lot of members of our community were terrorized without arrest, without conviction, but still significantly negatively impacted by the war on drugs under the parameters of the eligibility that we had determined. So in conversations that we had with GoBiz a year ago, I don't remember exactly, but we have been talking about this affidavit as a solution for quite a long time. So it is a little bit disappointing to hear that that hasn't been brought up yet with GoBiz. And I wonder if that could be quickly, because we had about 250 equity eligible operators here now. So to find out that half of them have been disqualified in the last month and have had no opportunity to be able to show additionally how they've been impacted, when those people have also been told after they applied that they would be able to be funded by the funds that still remained within the equity funding. So there's a lot of unfortunate information being shared here, and I'm hoping that there's a way we can address it.
Yeah, I think that GoBiz also needs to realize that Mendocino County is not an urban center, and that people, 5 miles of helicopter raids or camp raids is significant for the whole community, a lot of these places. And certainly they're recognizing it by saying general areas have been impacted. And so it would be great to get kind of that communication clear with GoBiz that we have unique circumstances here, that they're recognizing them, and that our criteria just aren't meshing at the moment. And we need to do something to bridge that.
Specifically, the affidavit, a sworn affidavit identifying the direct impact to the individual should solve the problem. That seems like a very simple solution. We've recommended it for quite some time, so hopefully that specifically can be discussed.
Or adopting their criteria too.
As well, but also
Yeah.
there may be some people that, because Southern Mendocino
Yeah,
zip codes
certainly.
don't include that, but there were still raids, and we provided to staff all of the documentation that Elevate Impact gave us, that were articles that people had provided to them. There were like 10 or 12 about raids, and then Hannah Nelson also provided a bunch of other articles. So we have some of that information, but a lot of it just doesn't exist and can't be tracked.
Okay.
Additionally, related to the technical assistance funds. So there were operators who applied for technical assistance and were told, you know, we're not starting the classes, we're not doing, so like, I'm not aware of any direct technical assistance that Elevate Impact provided for which they should be owed money. But the idea that there are people who applied for that and then weren't provided the funds to be able to go and do their own technical assistance, like get a contractor, or, you know, get a class from somewhere else. Like, we still think that those technical assistance funds, as they were earmarked for individual operators, should be distributed to those operators to still use for technical assistance. I don't know if that's just physically impossible because of the dates and the state saying, well, this date already passed, so you can't do it. But also, we have the ability, the department, the interim director has the ability to revise the manual at will, basically, from previous direction from the board. And so even reallocating those technical funds, making sure that they get to the people who requested them for technical assistance, but anything else being redirected into direct grant funds, and then being able to be distributed with this round of direct grant funds, that hopefully is something that it doesn't seem like it would need any sort of board approval. It would just need to happen internally within the department. So has that been discussed related to retaining those funds? Second question. I got one more after this.
Well, I think we understand the issue and that staff will be looking into that. And, you know, certainly, yeah, the board did give the director the ability to change the manual. It's, you know, it's capacity and timing at this point, right?
Absolutely. And then, but if we're trying to retain these funds within a very short window, there's only this like 5-week period in which we could make that quick change and then be able to reallocate the funds. So hopefully that would be possible. The last thing I want to bring up related to round 5 that's being applied for, and we provided to the department significant notes on the last application, is that without matching funds from the county, the maximum amount that we would be able to receive is $500,000 from the state. And so understanding the how these different programs have run out and the bandwidth and issues within the department, you know, and the smaller amount of money that is, there may be worthwhile to consider putting that into the fee and tax waiver programs, which are much also easier to administer in terms of need for staff to manage that. So those are the items, and certainly we still suggest that in the manual it updates. We're not just talking about camp raids. There could be any number of law enforcement entities that raided our local operators, and so being able to point to the direct negative impact of those raids as well as camp is in future important moving forward, as well as allowing PO boxes for the geography requirement, which we quoted Humboldt's. So there's some changes that would seem to be needed to be made in the manual to address some of these go-biz things that we can make very easily, and hopefully we can get these funds out quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Corinne Powell. So I want to thank staff for working on this issue and taking your comments from the last GGC meeting to heart and coming up with the reg or interpretation that people who have, you know, law enforcement bust or whatever in other jurisdictions are eligible within Mendocino County. So thank you.
Thank you, Corinne Powell again. And thank you, guys. I know all of you had a hand in taking a look at some of the regulations that have kind of been swept under the rug or just not considered. But at least there's one person in that category. I don't know how many others, but it does raise the question of whether or not with this new inclusion of an eligibility type, if we can access funds and get applications in before the end of October. So I don't know if you think that's possible, but it will make a difference if we know if it's possible or not as to how we proceed in other ways, because if there's no waiver money, then there needs to be payment of various taxes and fees, or if they're not paid, there's probably denials in line.
So your question is, if you started the process right now,
Today.
is it possible to get that through the system by October 31st? Or are we
if
taking on
not,
new applications of,
well,
you
the
know,
eligibility
in light of this,
window
with
does
this?
seem to be accepted and approved. That's wonderful. But not knowing exactly when that will open, if there's going to be processing time. I certainly hope there is, and I think anybody who takes advantage of this opportunity would be very diligent in getting whatever information is required.
So let's turn to staff.
That's concerned.
Is it possible?
So I will weigh in and say no. I believe that if we reopen this criterion, I don't believe that we can prioritize or allocate staff resources to reopening inequity criteria when we're pushing to try to get money out to meet the state's deadline. So that's my initial thought. And I do have one other comment for the committee when it's appropriate.
Yeah. So we're looking at round 5.
Well, how does that affect use of funds for payment of fees and taxes that will be due before then? Is there any way to utilize funds in that regard?
Well, it sounds like the answer was no.
Well, maybe we could explore that. You're saying, Michael Katz has offered that if you're eligible, you may get state benefits, but for what purpose? The state's fine with me. It's just the county. Okay, so you're saying no. That's very disappointing. And tell me again when you think that applications for Phase 5 would be available?
Okay, so I'm going to take that question.
Okay.
Okay. So do we have an idea about Phase 5 and when that might open?
So Steve Dunnicliff, no, at this point, the notice of funding has not been released. We believe that it will be released very soon, in September or October. But so once that notice goes out, the county will need to submit a grant application that we would hope would be funded, and dollars will be available at some point after that, but no timeline.
Okay, then I'd like to make a request that anyone who falls under this new eligibility window be prioritized over just the general marketplace, because we were denied in the beginning and now we are still suffering. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Good morning, supervisors, staff. Chantal Simon Pietri with Mainspring Consulting. I'll wait for the timer, or I can go off of that 1 second. There we go. I want to mostly just offer support for all of Michael's comments, is in particular having to do with the affidavit approach to resolve the gap between the eligibility. That there are, I'm hearing from cultivators who had approved budgets, were waiting to receive their check, were in the process, the program was stalled, and then now they've received the news that they're not going to be receiving any funding, and that's landing really hard for a lot of people. And so, again, this is something the MCA has put forward over 2 years ago, using an affidavit as a way for people to tell their story directly. An affidavit is a really common type of tool to have somebody tell their story and have it be confirmed. And so when your communications, when you next speak with Gobi, is to please bring that up and to have it, to push for that, not just to raise it as like, wouldn't this be nice? Oh, they say, no, now we're not going to ask for it anymore. But like, we need a cover to get people from here to there. That's all. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments online?
Hello, Hannah Nelson. I have 4 potential sources of data that may be possible to be investigated to use to support the 5-mile radius. One is the county every year receives DEA funding for cannabis eradication. I would imagine that the sheriff's department and the county contracting offices have records going back through the relevant years regarding the funding received for marijuana eradication throughout the county, including helicopter overflight activity. Second is the sheriff's department records. I think that these 2 areas are an untapped resource of data, and it's really incumbent. We asked the county years ago to work with the county law enforcement arms, the district attorney's office, the sheriff's department, to acquire the data, because receiving the data or having their data requested by the county as opposed to by a Freedom of Information Act, which would just be subject to the law enforcement exception and not be given, is a much more effective way of getting data. Additionally, there are FAA records that potentially could be researched. I imagine that the records go back at least part of the period of time, if not the entire period of time. I guess the issue here is, citizens are willing to put in effort. I did and would again do workshops helping people write affidavits. I did that to help the county apply for the LEEP funding to begin with. And I think that, a lot of citizens stand ready to try to help, but the tools that are most likely to garner the kind of data, aside from the affidavit, which is an important tool and is evidence, by the way, direct evidence and direct impact evidence, which should not be ignored, but additional supporting materials can be best garnered by the county requesting the information from its partners. And so an effort, I just think it's shameful that after years of having our manual actually state the criteria of eligibility, and many years later, the state coming in and deciding that that was insufficient. And now for us to have 5 weeks to try and disperse all this information and discount half of our applicants, I just think that there needs to be an urgency, and I want to appreciate everything that MCD is doing. I know they're working really, really hard. They were thrown into the situation and are trying to clean it up. So my frustration and my imploring of urgency is not at all directed to any kind of feeling of lack of effort on their part. But we need to make this right. This is not okay. It's already bad enough that almost $500,000 is being taken back by the state due to the inefficient or incorrect administration of the program for the phase 1 funding. We have to get out every single dollar of this $900,000 of round 3.
Yeah, understood.
I stand ready to help, and but the county has an ability to acquire information beyond what the average citizen can.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nelson. All right, any other comments online?
There are
No?
none.
Okay. All right, any further comments from the board? Okay.
Chair Haschak.
Yeah.
Steve Dunnicliff, may I provide a comment?
Yes.
So I just wanted to share for the committee, because again, recognizing that we are we've got a short deadline here. We're going to be pushing as hard as we can to ensure that all the funds that we're able to expend are going out the door before October 31st. There was a comment made about the director's ability to modify the program manual and change the allocation of funding. We believe that that's not possible, that it would essentially involve an attempt at unilaterally modifying the grant agreement budget that is can be amended only in writing between the county and the state. And so I did just want to share that for your committee's awareness, is that we don't believe that the LEEP budget is set unilaterally through the program manual. It's part of the grant agreement with the state.
Okay. And if anyone from DCC or GoBiz is watching this, I think that they need to realize that, you know, this deadline is really putting, you know, it's hampering our efforts to really efficiently use the money and to get it out to the intended purposes. And I think that the points made by MCA and public comment were right on, is that, you know, we have had a lot of difficulty in kind of, you know, even figuring out where the camp raids were, or, you know, finding that information, and that the 5-mile radius in most parts of this county were community raids, or, you know, affected a lot of people within that area. So I think that if we can find an affidavit or another way of justifying the use of these funds, it would be great. So, okay. Right, with that, we'll move on to item 3A, which is the approval of minutes of August 28th, 2023's regular meeting.
Move approval.
Okay, I'll second. Are there any public comments about the minutes? Seeing none? Okay, we'll call for the question.
Supervisor Mulhern?
Yes.
Supervisor Hashak?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, are there any other public expression for item 3B, that something that hasn't been on the agenda so far? See, okay.
Morning, supervisors, county staff. Michael Katz, Executive Director of the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. I did want to comment on a historic first from this past weekend at the Mendocino County Fair and Apple Show, where Visit Mendocino County and the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance had a booth promoting and supporting our local craft cannabis community as part of an integrated Mendocino agricultural experience. And while there were some challenges in getting to the fair, we did ultimately get there. We're grateful to Travis and BMC for standing behind us. We're grateful to you, Supervisor, for helping to support. And I just think it's an important step forward for the integration and normalization of cannabis in Mendocino County, and we look forward to more events like it in the future.
Yes, and I was able to visit that exhibit yesterday. It was very well done. And you know, if the state of California's state fair has a cannabis exhibit, you know, Mendocino County certainly should.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you for your help.
Thank you for your work on that. And I'd also, if I could add that I attended the economic summit for Redwood Empire Thursday and Friday, and there was a panel on the cannabis issue, and, you know, on the North Coast, and how to make it stronger, and the issue, you know, the opportunities and the challenges. And it was very good, well done. Jim Roberts and Janine Coleman were both presenters, and I just really appreciate their involvement and bringing that issue as a critical issue in the Redwood Empire.
Absolutely, and we stand here always ready to engage. You know, economic development around cannabis for this county is going to continue to be very important, and we see lots of opportunities in the future and look forward to continuing to work with you on them.
Yeah, and I think Kelly Hansen attended that workshop, and so, and there, anyway, okay. Any other public expression? Seeing none, we will, let's see, just the only announcement is October 10th for the second round of ordinance changes at 9 o'clock in the board chambers. We will try to get that information out as early as possible about what county council is looking at. And so, oh, yes, Chantal.
I'm back. Chantal Simon Pietri from Mainspring Consulting. I was just asking Michael if this is an appropriate moment to make a comment on something unrelated. And I'm going to go for it, and you can tell me if it's the inappropriate time. My comment is based upon current sheriff-led and DFW-supported raids and eradication efforts on illegal operations. I'm assisting quite a few landowners with the process of responding to their notices of violation or their raid reports. And I wanted to report back on what I've seen on site when I get onto the properties. I was on one in Redwood Valley, and I'm headed to a second one in Redwood Valley and a third one that occurred out on Mendocino Pass Road. The one in Redwood Valley that I went to, the property owner didn't speak English, was not present on site at the time. And what I saw on site was really shocking. And nobody was there, it had happened, but what I saw was the entire complex of greenhouses was bulldozed by the sheriff's department staff and pushed into a pile that made their cleanup really challenging. It was kind of like a hurricane had happened there on site. The water tanks had bullet holes in them that they had been shot into, so that they were no longer able to hold water. And the generator had sand placed in it, so all of their ability to generate power on site. And these were kind of like sabotage efforts that weren't done by the landowner. The landowner, migrant, legal citizen now, unable to speak English, can't read any of the reports or the notices that were left at their gate asking for support, and really was like, why did they do this to me? Why would they go to that level? Like, I want to get licensed. They have to go through phase 3 now. They have the proper zoning to do it. And I had a really hard time explaining to him why. I then spoke about it with the DFW person who was in charge and on site at the time, and I'm really stepping into a whole new political realm here to bring this up in the public comment, but their response was, when there are DFW-led search warrants, that type of sort of destructive behavior isn't happening on the properties. And I would agree with that when I've been to eradication efforts back in the ones that happened in 2018, 2019, 2020, and they were DFW-led. It was just simply a documentation, photo documentation. This is what we saw. This is what you need to do, is like an administrative process to correct it, and it gave the person an opportunity to do it. It didn't hand them a whole other additional layer of labor that they had to deal with, which is dealing with, however many square feet of hoop houses, PVC, wood, concrete, all just pushed into a mound. And so I don't know what's appropriate, but I just wanted to raise it as somebody that's getting out on properties as a private citizen and consultant being brought out by the landowner, that there's something egregious still going on. Even now, as we're discussing how to correct past wrongs, there's still some level of, I think, misuse of power occurring currently. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public expression? Okay. Any other announcements? All right, with that, we will adjourn the meeting at 10:46. Thank you, everybody.